Welcome back. I wonder, before I continue, whether I could just play a bite from what the Defence Minister said.
The cluster cannot stand idle as our democracy is undermined in the full glare of the public and the world. The cluster ministers have instructed senior government officials within our cluster to make recommendations on how to prevent such incidences from happening in the future. Certain measures by the security cluster have been put in place with immediate effect to ensure that such never occurs again.
Well, it doesn't seem as if we're going to get structural change. It looks as if we're going to get more police, Richard.
Well, Professor Turok said people mustn't overreact. This is an overreaction. This is the executive, unnerved by Malema's very precise bombing attack, as it were, on them. And now really calling for the strong arm of the state to impose its force on an opposition party, potentially. Now, you know, it's the sort of thing which at the time may not seem that troubling, but 10 years later you might look back and say, well, actually from that moment that bad things started to happen. Parliament's security should be Parliament's concern, not the executive, first of all. Secondly, when you start bringing the riot police in to arrest members of Parliament, one must understand the significance of that. It's a very, very draconian, potentially bad step.
So what I'm worried about in playing this to you is that it appears to me that far from actually having a reflective attitude about what we should do, in fact, we're going back to our default position, which was we've had for 100 years.
It does seem that way, and it seems that that culture of the state using its force to protect the establishment, which is really what I think is at the root here, the ANC unnerved by someone shaking their grip on power, perhaps. And for a long time, we've wondered what would happen when the ANC began to fear losing its grip on power. Instead of turning back to its more thoughtful, reflective, sensible approach, you've had a couple of weeks with ANC leaders saying the most outlandish things, such as Grady Mantashe saying we should move Parliament to the north of the country where we're in control of the police and the police will move faster. Does he really understand
Professor Fikeni
what he means?
Professor Fikeni was suggesting earlier in our conversation that if you took, for example, the source of this, Nkandla, it would be far easier if they decided, well, the best way to deal with this is to essentially deal with it properly.
Well, you'd take the wind out of the sails of Malema, wouldn't you? You'd take the wind out of the sails of the opposition. You'd also do what the Constitution says, which is to respect the public protector and require the executive to properly account to Parliament. I think the calculus has changed here, though, because I don't hold a brief for Malema. I want to make that clear. But what he is able to do is touch a nerve within the ANC and join the dots to a working class community where, bear in mind, he got 22% in some wards and voting districts around Johannesburg.
Shouldn't we be worried about the point that Professor Turok makes earlier that, I mean, they do this once, they'll keep on doing it. Oh, goodness, we've had success. And that creates huge problems for the kind of a proper debate.
Yes, and he can't keep doing it. And Malema, and if the rule cannot, if you continue to break the rules, you must suffer a penalty for that.
Well, you know what the legislation says,
Well, are you going to tell me, aren't you? Because you've got it open there.
Yes, the legislation says that the security services can intervene, enter Parliament, if certain things are happening.
Yes, but that says only when life of limb is at stake.
Yes, isn't it restricted?
That's a selective,
which is what I saw.
Well,
just read on.
If security services may enter upon the precincts, if there's any problem with with the permission under the authority of the Speaker.
Yes.
However, if there's a threat to life or safety, any person, then they can go in. But I want to make it clear.
Yes.
This is the ultimate. Really, we must not go there. I agree with Richard entirely. We must not go there. The ANC must not go there. We must protect the integrity of Parliament as a reasonable democratic institution.
So how do we do that? What I'm interested in, because these programs are devoted to the Constitution, what I'm interested in, Parliament is a crucial component of this.
Absolutely.
How do we actually get this? What do we learn from this that we can do better next time? If you were in charge, so I made you president for 3 or the Speaker, perhaps is much more appropriate here. What would you do if you were the Speaker?
I would insist that the ministers respond to questions and that the president responds to questions, and I would insist and I would ensure that Parliament works the way it should do, and the Speaker has powers.
So are we saying a lot of the responsibility here is now on the Speaker?
Absolutely.
And would you agree with that, Professor Fikeni?
Well, I would say it is time for Parliament on 2-3 occasions now it has been tested to say after 20 years, are our rules as effective in dealing with matters of this nature? And how is the Parliament working? And you just compose a committee, including opposition parties, to say, how do we deal with these things going forward? And also suggest on how the security should be propped up. And for the executive, I think it was not the wisest of move to show what would be a preemptive strong arm tactic. They ought to have just gone into their drawing board to say quietly, should this happen and the internal parliamentary security fail, what would we do without even calling any press conference?
But can I just ask you,
because this would always be seen as an overreaction.
can I just ask you this? I mean, if we were in a place like the United States of America, not that it's a panacea of anything, I might add, but I mean, I couldn't imagine a situation whereby suddenly the State Department or Home Affairs or what have you decided that it was going to bring in the federal police because some uproar had occurred in Congress. I mean, Congress would tell them where to get off immediately. Surely the responsibility here is for the Speaker to say, this is my province, get out, get off my terrain. It's me who has to decide.
But that's correct, but again, the weakness here is that we put so much power on the Speaker alone. If you had a consultative committee for Parliament to deal with these issues, then you can remove any subjective pressures or even political pressures on the Speaker to say, I got this advice for this particular team for the security issues, for this particular team for the rules, so that you do not say it ultimately depends on one individual and one individual only.
Don't you chaps, I'm going to come to you, Richard, you chaps in Parliament and women in Parliament, haven't you done this before?
You know, there's a Chief Whips Forum, which meets weekly.
What do they do other than have tea?
They haggle. They decide...
So isn't he right? I mean, why should they not be now saying we need an emergency meeting to sort this out?
They should, I agree.
Have they done that before?
Yes, they are. Well, you know, there have been many crises in Parliament, many.
Not one like this.
Not one like this, but many, many disagreements.
Okay.
And the Chief Whips meet and they discuss and they haggle. That's part of the process.
Well, yes, Richard?
Well, the point I was going to make is that the Speaker's authority must be respected. The Speaker's job...
She's got to exert authority.
Well, she's got to win it and earn it as well. And her non-partisanship, I'm afraid to say, is in question. And I think it was an unwise appointment because she is also the chair of the ANC. And that's a very senior position in the ANC. Comes with lots of responsibilities in terms of the partisan interests of the ruling party. And to expect her to balance that with being a neutral, non-partisan speaker, I think is unreasonable. I don't think any human being could manage that conflict of interest. And so it's very hard for her to command the respect of all the parties in Parliament.
Well, I'm afraid I've run out of time. I mean, we could continue this because there are lots of issues that flow. The real concern that I've had, because this is a program devoted to constitutional questions, is what does this say about the future of Parliament as a central fulcrum of our constitutional democracy? How does it hold the executive accountable? How does it regain a legitimacy? And what does it do in direct response to what has understandably been of great concern to the country with regard to the protest that was conducted by the EFF? You've heard quite a lot of the debate. What's the best solution? Judge for yourself. Goodbye.